everyone, I'm excited to be here. We have Raw Egg Nationalist with us again. I am so excited. And what we wanted to talk about is, I was looking at his magazine. I'd never seen a print copy before, Man's World. And hold it up so they can see the anime girls and everything, because your hands are
perfection. Yes.
And I'll try to put like one on the screen here if I remember, and you can turn it over to show sort of the back of it. But when I was looking at this, you know, like Shinzo Abe, big titty anime girl, Trump, like a missile.
Also, just the formatting in general, though. Like, I remembered from my childhood years just really loving, for example, Wired magazine, because it just had this incredible formatting and layout, and I've missed that, and we're seeing it again here, and it's just so fun to see. Like,
go to the one of us where it's like racist or whatever, right? You know, so you can see how they did our article on it. But the reason I find this interesting and I wanted to focus on it is the new right has developed a very unique aesthetic philosophy. And I think that this cover sort of perfectly represents it, so people understand it's not just Malcolm saying like the alt-right cat girl phenomenon or whatever.
Yeah, no, or proof. This is not just in Malcolm's head. This is awesome, and it's here.
And I'll also put a Sargon of Akkad tweet here.
死んだは初めて俺に伝えている。絶望の匂いだ。面白いこと見せようか。ほら、こんなにチンが多すぎて。お父さん。あかん。ドナルド君、まだ死ぬ時じゃないでしょ。アメリカ、万歳、ファイト。絶対負けないよ。ランド、ジュライドで。だろう。だってまだ3級いけないでしょ。一回も言ってください。おい、仲良くして。この世界、傷ついていけるかな。昔グレートだと。大きに、またグレートになるかな。あのさ、有名人なら誰かのマンコを掴んでいいさ。そうそうそうそう。やらせるで。
Which I found amazing, where they had like anime style Trump and over the top, and I thought it was the best. But I'd love to just hear your thoughts, how you constructed this and how you think about this sort of aesthetic move, because it's really a new artistic movement that is starting, and I don't think many people are cataloging or talking about.
Yeah, so I started Man's World really by accident. You know, I was thinking of, well, I mean, I write about masculinity a lot. You know, that's my bread and butter. That's what I've been writing about on Twitter and writing articles about, you know, for five years now, actually. But in the sort of summer of 2020, I was thinking about men's magazines, and I was thinking, you know, why are there no men's magazines anymore? You know, so Playboy is totally paused now. Playboy is so. You know, I mean, they had a transgender centerfold, I think.
Gosh, okay.
Yeah.
What was that men's magazine that I used to love? Maxim! Do you remember this? Okay,
wasn't that old fashioned though? I felt like it was.
No. So I got to talk about this, because this is a historic phenomenon that disappeared, but was like, I think, a staple of our childhoods. When you would go to the magazine rack before you get on a plane or something like that, there was always like a category. I think Maxim was sort of the main one, where it would have like irreverent, funny articles that were targeted at men. And sort of the point of it was to be edgy and man focused. They even had a TV channel called Spike TV that was edited at this demographic and this format. We actually know the guy who was one of the showrunners for that, who now runs Dad Saves America. But anyway, they had shows like, so funny that the person who ran the man show was Jimmy Kimmel. But I remember like an example of like a joke they had on the show. Can you believe that Jimmy Kimmel ran this joke? Is he would have a young kid go around and try to buy alcohol at convenience stores. And when they'd ask him for his ID, he'd ask them for their green cards.
I just need to help old ladies cross the street.
Old ladies?
Yeah.
I'm not old.
Sure you are.
Anyway, continue. I document this sort of.
Yeah, so I was thinking about men's magazines and, you know, why Playboy has disappeared. You know, I mean, part of it's something that I remember from my teenage years, you know, growing up, things like Maxim, FHM, but also Playboy, you know, and there's this old chestnut. I read Playboy for the articles.
Yes.
But it's true. I mean, I say this a lot, but it's true. Like Playboy used to have great writers: Carl, Philip Roth, Norman Mailer, all of these great writers of the middle and late 20th century. Would regularly write for Playboy.
Hunter Thompson
Reportage.
too, right?
Yeah, Hunter S. Thompson. Yeah, exactly. So you'd have, it was like it was a trend setting, taste setting thing. Playboy. It was for like aspiring men, men who have aspirations, men who want to, sort of better themselves, and
but also cutting edge culture. Yeah, it was on the forefront of change. These were agentic people.
Exactly, and it wasn't just about the beautiful women, the naked women. I mean, that was a big part of it. That was part of the lifestyle, and obviously that was part of Hugh Hefner's lifestyle. But Playboy was a cultural phenomenon, and so I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if we actually, on the right, if we had a new kind of Playboy for the new massively online internet era, something that sort of combined the best writing on the dissident right, whatever you want to call it, with kind of lifestyle stuff, and also this kind of basically like the Twitter 4chan kind of aesthetic where you're so you'd be mixing like classic Playboy, the classic Playboy layout. I mean, the magazine looks like a classic Playboy in many respects, but it's kind of bizarre and sort of a bit postmodern, and it has all of this.
Yeah, you are really combining like old and new aesthetics, which I really like. Got this like vintage.
Well, no, but I mean, I think that what you're showing there, can you put that closer to the camera so we can really see that, is a artistic style that is unique to this sort of new right movement, where you're combining nostalgia with irreverence and cultural subversion.
Yeah, but still like with like irreverence, like this is, there are puns, it's playful.
Around the world in 80 lays is what it says.
Yeah.
So that was the winner of. So we had a Pulp Fiction contest in the magazine, and that was the winner of the Pulp Fiction contest. I wanted people to write classic Pulp Fiction short stories, racy, exciting, for men. And I mean, the winner is great. In fact, most of the entries that we had for the competition, we had hundreds of entries. They were really good. It was really very, very high standard. But I mean, the thing about the aesthetics thing, I suppose, is that really it's quite heavily influenced by Bronze Age pervert, by Bronze Age mindset. I mean, he helped to put aesthetic considerations, I think, back on the radar for the right in a way that they weren't before. I mean, Bronze Age mindset as a book is as much about the kind of madcap energy of the book, of the style, the kind of irreverence,
the style of
irreverence,
writing,
and vitalism too. So
yes.
the aesthetics is permeated in every grammatical choice that he makes, as well as this like very heavy vitalistic enthusiasm, which is somewhat reminiscent of the Playboy days, I think. There's that same sort of enthusiasm for the future. And
I think he tones it up. So if we want to talk about Bronze Age pervert, there's a few things to break out here. One is his name is intentionally, I talked about combining nostalgia, Bronze Age, with subversion, pervert. It does that perfectly in the way that he constructed it. If you look at his writing style, he intentionally does not use correct periods and everything. He does lots of run-ons. He doesn't follow the rules that we associate with high status writing. And post him and you being doxxed, we now know, he went to Yale. You went to, what was it, Oxford or Cambridge? Like
both.
Both. So you have all of the criteria that we would associate with access to high class, high culture. And yet when both you and him entered the public community, you did so pseudonymously to negate the classic signs of status. And then you, and he more than you to start, wrote in a way that you could almost say was vulgar to high status, because it could not be used to signal high status. It intentionally subverted everything that we associate with an educated man while presenting ideas in an educated format.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting way of putting it. And certainly, I mean, just with the magazine, then there are fake adverts throughout the magazine. I mean, that's been a big part of the magazine from the start, is these kind of fake adverts. So one of them, for example, I've created a kind of a mock coffee brand that's that's like Black Rifle Coffee, basically, because I find Black Rifle Coffee absurd, and these like veteran-owned coffee companies, you know, where they have this like men shooting flamethrowers and stuff, and women with big tits, and it's all like it's almost like a parody of itself. So I created this veteran-owned coffee company called Cuck Operator Coffee Company, and it's like basically it's for like ex special forces guys who have a cuck fetish, and you know.
I mean, hold on, this is so perfectly capturing all of the things we're talking about here, where I mean, I think part of it is like Americana and over the top Americana. And so here you're taking the idea of consumerism and over the top American consumerism that is inauthentically sold to, because I think, you know, the point of this is to capture the inauthenticity of the way consumerist trends have gone as sort of art. And what's funny about, you know, hearing you do this is you would look at something like this, and if you were studying this in art history, you would associate this with a lot of the classic artistic movements of like the 70s and the 60s and stuff like that. It's like, oh, they're subverting, you know, like over the top inauthentic advertisement. Whereas today, because the left controls so much of the advertising and everything like that, you know, and we're like, they're subverting the cringeness that comes from corporations trying to market to people using and you remove any authenticity from that by making it entirely fake.
Yeah.
Which is like really satisfying to engage with. But continue. Sorry, I'm just sort of like analyzing. That's what I wanted to do.
Reveling in the brilliance of it. We can do that. That's why we're here today.
Yeah, so I mean, the fake adverts are a really, really big part of man's world, and they have been. It's actually a bit of a burden for me coming up with these new fake brands. Like every issue, I have to come up with something new, and I have to top what I did in the previous issue. But there are some long-running ones like Cuck Operator Coffee Company, and yeah, we just do. I mean, it's integral. It's not filler. That's the other thing as well. That's important. You know, it's an integral part of the actual package. You know, it's
well, I think anyone who grew up
package.
reading magazines, half or at least a quarter read them for the ads, because the ads have been like, they're sometimes the best part of many magazines. They're what many brands invested so much creative energy into creating. Now also ads are just so awful in most of the magazines I've looked at. It's like for SaaS software and stuff, like it's not relatable, it's not creative, it's not fun, it's not visually interesting. So
you know what would be fun is the gayest children's clothesline ever. Like we've been voted by like Queer Magazine and Pride the gayest children's line ever, and like just try to overdo the top when they had like the Target scandal and the Bud Light scandal. I think that something funny could be done. But I think looking at the ways that corporate culture has gone over the top was in the last cycle, and then subverting that is really fun. Another thing I find about the artistic style that you've chosen here.
Oh, I should probably. Sorry, I found the page. Show the.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, it's great. Like they're great. They're nicely formatted.
Bag of Cuck operated coffee, company signature Cuck blend. Cuck operated coffee. I love it how it says company with a K. Very, very here. Cuck Operator is a proud cuckold owned company.
And then, but on the other page, on the facing page, then of course you've got the Cuck beard, the Jack Murphy Cuck beard.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. My God! Wait. So hold on. What's this whole Cuck Jack Murphy thing? I don't know this. Is this story?
Oh God, this is a rabbit hole. So Jack Murphy was this like masculinity guy who had a masculine. Do you know the guy?
Continue. This is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of regrettably, I actually went on his podcast early on when I didn't really know who he was, but he
seemed fine enough, other than the cuckoldry thing.
But and he had this masculine fraternity called the Liminal Order, and he had a meltdown on a podcast because somebody brought up the fact that he had written an article some years before about cuckoldry, about sending his girlfriend off to have sex with random guys from Tinder. And then after this meltdown, it came out that he had actually been like a cam guy, and he'd
Wow.
stuck stuff up his bum on camera and stuff, and there were videos and they were posted, and it all kind of imploded. So that's where the beard comes from.
I am deeply. I mean, look, I kind of feel like I wasn't born with like embarrassing fetishes. Like I am deeply happy that I do not get turned on by that.
I'm just glad he monetized it. You know what? That's if you do it for profit,
I monetize it, you're right.
Differently about it. Yeah.
You can make a lot of money doing OnlyFans and stuff like that. You know that the couple who got the squirrel was killed, Peanut the squirrel, and all that? They were making $80,000 a month on OnlyFans.
And they were using the death of the squirrel, weren't they, as a funnel as well? It was like,
I don't think they.
I bet they were.
I mean, you gotta.
It doesn't hurt, Malcolm.
You gotta monetize everything, right? Yeah. Oh, there's something about the ghost of the squirrel or something like that could be a fun company thing. Just like I don't know. I'm just trying to have fun with this, but I'd love your thoughts on why the modern right has adopted the aesthetics of things like anime. I mean, my thesis would be is that anime was one of the last, like if you look at Japanese culture, it was one of the last bastions of mainstream media that was not affected by wokeism. Because wokeism took a while to get there.
There's still fan service in anime. I would say it's still largely exempt.
They still have like openly pronatalist shows. So you have that. You have the idea that anime was considered low culture. So in the same way that like writing poorly could be a sign of I'm not playing into your cultural game, using big titty anime girls can do that. But I'm wondering if there's anything else or what your thesis is on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've nailed a lot of it with the, by talking about the authenticity of anime. I think that anime is fundamentally like an authentic expression of Japanese culture, largely untouched by the West, or at least the way that anime kind of relates to the West is interesting, and it's not kind of colonized by the West so much. In a way that often a lot of other foreign cultural products are or have been since the Second World War. Yeah, I just think intrinsically, like the subject matter of so much anime is just the kind of stuff that guys like. I think there's guns, swords, heroes, that kind of stuff.
Lots of harems. I want at least. Simone, why do you deny me my harem? It's one of
Malcolm. The harems are for closers.
The harems are for closers. Okay. I'll work on it. No, but I think that you're right about this. One of the things, and anime, I think one of the interesting things about it is I think it fulfills some male fantasies in ways that are almost like subversive, where a common trope within anime is a girl who is, phenotypically young around a guy. And I've noticed that a lot of these are actually showing the girl and the guy in a father-daughter role for a society that has so lost the idea of father-daughter relationships that the only way it can think of a guy being around a young girl is in sort of this perverse context. And I've always found that to be deeply sad, where it's very obvious to me if you watch one of these shows, oh, this is trying to give you the feeling you would have if you had a daughter and you were raising her and you were protecting her, but it's not his daughter.
I mean, I think that anime in general deals with a lot of, and Japanese culture and Japanese media more broadly, I think deal with actually a lot of subjects that actually would get swept under the carpet or would be very difficult to be depicted in Western media. I mean, I think the Japanese have a very different idea about, well, there's a Jonathan Bowden essay actually about the kind of difference between Japanese and European culture, where he says, like, we have this idea that kind of shameful or difficult thoughts, difficult urges have to be repressed and hidden away, whereas actually to make them safe, whereas actually the Japanese think that the best way to deal with them is to depict them and to bring them out into the open so that people can see them and actually recognize that they exist. And so, I mean, you do get a lot of, obviously you get some pretty extreme stuff in anime, but I think that has an appeal. I mean, it has an appeal beyond simply being appealing to like perverts, it actually has an appeal to people because because it depicts aspects, I think, of the human experience that are actually either taboo or perhaps, you know, just aren't depicted in Western media in the same way. It's a very complex art form, actually, anime. You know, you can laugh at anime and you can say, oh, it's, you know, it's these schoolgirls in, you know, with short skirts on and you know, all this kind of like silly stuff, Sailor Moon, but actually it's really not. I mean, it's really a very, very deep art form.
The vast majority of media I watch is anime.
It's sometimes it's deep. Sometimes it's just girls who are ponies who love to race. But for most.
Well, and the ways that it can subvert. I mean, we have a whole episode. I encourage people to watch it because it's an episode that I really like that we've done on Gurren Lagann and other over-the-top pro-natalist animes, where pronatalism and environmentalists being treated as villains. In Gurren Lagann, which is one of the most famous animes ever made, the core bad guy believes that Earth can only have so many people on it. Basically, it's against the concept of like environmental thresholds, and they're presented as like Captain Planet villains. But I note here the new rights aesthetic, when it takes anime, it doesn't use it in the way that the Japanese use anime. So the Japanese use anime as sort of a broad cultural way of expressing things. When the new right takes the anime aesthetic, what it does is it overtunes it with vitalism to be like over the top, as you saw in the video, or as you know, if you put up the cover of the piece, Simone, like it's very much like vitalism, like life, like, you know, the missiles coming out of the mouth and everything, like so much is happening. And
so that's an image of, so that's supposed to, you know, that's Trump, that's the fight image, basically.
Yes.
And what was his thought on the two things on the side here? I'm not familiar with these.
I just said to my design guy, look, I want an anime Trump fight, you know, do whatever you want to do. And he came back with this, and it was perfect.
Well, it's perfect. And with Shinzo Abe, who, you know, clearly saved his life, as we had to explain to as confused Italian the other day.
Yeah, I had to, the Italian reporters here at our house this weekend, I had to explain to them how Shinzo Abe saved Trump's life. And they're like, wait, do people like believe this? And I go, well, like emotionally we believe it. We don't need to actually believe it.
I mean, there's, you know, the difference between emotional belief and real belief is actually pretty vague. I want to know what the negative aesthetic prompts are for the new right. What is the aesthetic antithesis to the new right? Because I mean, we've got anime, we've got Greco-Roman influences, we got 1940s to 1960s aesthetics. I'm digging it. There's like a bit of a slightly fascist sci-fi vibe as well, which I'm really loving. But yeah, what is not new right aesthetics?
So I would say that the new right is kind of ideologically and aesthetically rebelling against the kind of, on the one hand, like the William Buckleyite kind of conservatism. So like tweed jackets, and I mean, there's a place for prep in the new right, absolutely. Like the Ivy League style classic prep, all that kind of thing.
There's always a place for it. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's classic, it's Americana. I mean, when it's done well, it's done well. But there's a kind of like staid conservatism that's represented by the kind of William Buckley style of conservatism, you know, standing athwart history, yelling stop, and all that kind of stuff.
Like yes to Kennedy prep, no to country club prep.
Yeah, and just to the kind of like closet homosexual kind of conservative, lavender mafia, that kind of
mega church polo shirts and khakis.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. The kind of like aesthetic that you might associate with like a university conservative club, you know, where it's like it's a bunch of dorks trying to look like preppy, and they never get any girls, and there's nothing.
The pink Vineyard Vines t-shirt, polo shirt,
something like that. But then also what you've got as well, I think, is you've got a revolt against the kind of, like I was saying with Cuck Operator Coffee Company, like that kind of silly kind of, it's basically cuck-servative, like beer and boobies kind of masculinity. I think that's what Cernovich calls it, you know, where it's like, I like cigars, I like whiskey, I use man wipes on my face, you know. It's like there's this whole kind of really, really kind of debased kind of conservative aesthetic that's built around like the Second Amendment, beer, man caves, and all this kind of stuff. That's
and
kind of really, really kind of sad and you know, kind of like doesn't actually have any genuine energy to it. And all of these guys, you know, are kind of ruled by their wives and, you know, only allowed to go in the man cave at certain times.
Oh
and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say, yeah, the negative prompts are anything really that isn't kind of sexy and young and that doesn't kind of have a genuine organic energy to it, because a lot of,
you know, another thing that occurs to me,
Egler's
actually, I was thinking about this not just when I was looking at, I think it was like New York Times or some publications illustrations that they made for their authors, and they were just hideous illustrations, like just really unflattering. And then I was also thinking about Mary Harrington's, one of her most canceled opinions, that at least she told us at the time, who knows what new thing has been like disagreed upon, but she had this hot take that children's book illustrations that are modern, they look terrible. I don't know if you've seen them recently, but they're incredibly ugly. We're kind of like this low-key propaganda normalizing lower achievement, ugliness, mediocrity. And I think that's just another thing that's so absent from the pages of this magazine. Everything is just gorgeous. Everything is gorgeous.
There has been a thing within leftist art for a while to intentionally uglify the art.
Like why, for example, for like op-ed contributors, do you need their illustrated portraits to look ugly?
I'll explain to you why. I've gone over this before, but it's important to understand how this happened. So what happened is, if you go to the 1980s or the 1990s, the core emotion that conservatives used to motivate behavior, voting, everything like that was disgust. This is when you had the Christian majority in America, and they were like gayness, isn't it gross? Ew, like, doesn't it generate disgust in you? And then we as a civilization sort of moved past just not doing things because of disgust. Like, that's what Mother Teresa largely represented. Oh, look, the lepers disgust me, but I understand that that's just an evolved emotion that's meant to protect me from disease, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so we moved against disgust, and an artistic leftist movement then became about elevating things that were disgusting for their own sake, I think, is one thing we saw here. The other thing that we saw at the same time was trying to break the male idea of what beauty looked like. But I think that this is in part why within New Right Things, like you have the trio, like Trump.
I find this insulting because it is not a female ideal of beauty. I mean, I'm gonna
no, it's not. But when I said a female idea of beauty, like the big titty anime girl, okay, like this is an idea of feminine beauty that the left has completely removed. If you look at their characters, we've noted that, like, ironically, they have taken female characters and they've like made them sort of masculine looking and removed their breasts. And I'm like, you've just made them look underage. Like, this is not okay. Like, you look at like She-Ra or something like that, like the remake. And so I think that it's a revolution against these two things.
See, I mean, I think it's very deep. I think this kind of war on beauty is actually, I mean, you see it in architecture, you see it in mid-20th century modernism. I mean, ugliness, brutalism. I mean, it's called brutalism.
Not subtle.
You know, it was used as an literally an ideological hammer to crush people with. You know, I mean, there's a reason why basically all kind of communist public buildings are hideous, because I mean, they tell, and you know, Roger Scruton has wrote about this at great length, and others have too. You know, it's a way of, among other things, crushing individuality and crushing aspiration. It's like, you know, you make people live in an inhuman environment where they're not surrounded by beauty, and it's demoralizing.
It really is.
It really does crush you. And I think that there's something about this, like you say, children's illustrations. There's something about this in movies as well, you know, where the heroine is never beautiful. I mean, Snow White is not a beautiful woman anymore. Snow White is one of these strange creatures.
Well, and she's no longer the fairest of it all, of us all. She's
the most communist.
Yeah, she's the most equal distribution. This is not about looks anymore.
But I mean, I think that in large part it's about eliminating particular forms of aspiration, particular visions of like the good life. You know, what is it? What does it actually mean? What should you strive for? Should you strive to be, unique? Should you strive to be beautiful? Should you strive to improve your appearance, or should you accept that you are just one of 7 billion people on the planet, all of whom are deserving of exactly the same base level of like material subsistence and nothing else? So I mean, I think it's been happening for a long time, and I think it's not trivial. Ugliness is not trivial, and surrounding people with ugliness, cocooning them in ugliness, is actually, I think, is a very, very powerful propaganda strategy, and it works. It works.
Yeah. I want to point out here, one of the artistic pieces that I think has been really critical to the formation of the sort of sci-fi, you could say pseudo-fascist vibe of new right art that Simone was talking about is Starship Troopers. And when Vanderhoeven was putting that movie together, I'm talking about the movie, not the books. Like we have an episode on the movie where I'm like, this movie is like the left telling on themselves. Like this is a democratic society with a Black African leading it, and they freak out about it because people are expected to pay some price to vote. They're expected to do something to give back to the state. They're like, if anything is required of me, it's the worst thing ever. But anyway, within Starship Troopers, when Paul Vanderhoeven was making it, and I view it as almost a perfect piece of art for what it means to be right-leaning today, because it was a leftist who was creating this. When he created it, one of the questions he asked himself was, okay, how will I cue people that this is an evil government that you're not supposed to want to emulate? And what he said to himself is, he said, I thought everyone would know because I chose only beautiful white actors to play the main parts. And he thought that people, when they saw all of these attractive people, would know that it was supposed to be evil, because only in an evil government would you have only attractive people.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, because I mean, in the book, the Robert Heinlein book, then the main character, Johnny Rico, is actually, I think, from the Philippines, and he's not white. He's actually
in the movies he's not white either. He's from Argentina.
Yeah, Buenos Aires. Yeah. Whatever though. I mean, yeah, it is telling.
But yeah, I mean, the Starship Troopers discourse, of course, rolls on Twitter.
Right.
Oh, you're supposed to empathize with the bugs, and it's an amazing this kind of ridiculous media literacy kind of meme, and it's very telling, that actually the communists choose the bugs. They choose the soulless bugs that literally tear humans limb from limb and suck their brains out via feeding tubes over, attractive, high achieving, because
a democratic, united human planet with like the protagonist from South America, the leader of the world is from Africa, Sky Marshal to Maru. Like what is an African woman, by the way, Sky Marshal to Maru. But I'd point out here that when he's saying this, you might think, oh, they're not actually saying, oh, the bugs. No, like search on Google, like Starship Troopers false flag attack, Starship Troopers, like were the bugs actually the good guys? Like people actually think this, and this was part of the authorial intent that backfired so hard.
And what's interesting as well, actually, about the film is that Johnny Rico, the main character, Casper Van Dien, he's from a very prosperous family, but they're not citizens.
Yeah,
they're not citizens, and they don't want him to do military service. But actually, so you've got a society where you can be prosperous and have a wonderful life, without political participation. I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's really not a simple.
It doesn't imply, because normally in the fascist worlds, if you are not fully bought into the governmental system, you are suffering. You are in an underclass, and like clearly that's not the case. Clearly, people have freedom. Yeah, it's wild.
And it's the freedom that instigated the war. It was the fact that we allowed for religion. Remember, it was started by Mormon separatists settling on a planet they weren't supposed to be settling on. But the very fact that Mormon separatists were able to get to a point where they could do that in opposition to the government, and keep in mind, we know this was in opposition to the government because we know they were separatists. It was not the government that started this war.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. It doesn't really repay this kind of ridiculous, heavy-handed kind of Marxist retelling that the left wants it to. It's a very, very interesting cultural artifact, actually. I mean, I remember watching Starship Troopers when it came out in 1999. I was 12, and it was the coolest thing ever. I loved it because of the fight, the battles and stuff.
Yeah.
And Denise Richards, obviously, and you know, but like it's actually, I mean, as a piece of its time, as a kind of as a cultural artifact, then it's actually much more complex than just being a, you know, just a sci-fi film where there are big battles and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, recently you had the Helldivers 2 come out, which
Yes.
mimicked a lot of the art and ideals from this, and I think a lot of
Mm.
one of the reasons it did so well within the gaming space is it came off as right-coded art.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people want it. There's I think that backlash, that desire to fight against the ugliness and to feed into this vitalism is 100% there. It's really the time for man's world. It's time for this movement to rise. And I
Yeah,
mean, at least we
I
have
think,
the vibe for it now.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think young people are tired of being stamped on, and especially young men. I mean, it's not just young men, but I think more than anybody else, it's young white men in particular
Oh
who,
yeah.
you know, told, you know, you can't, well, you're a bad person and you can't trust any of your innate desires, anything that you want, you know, it's illegitimate. You have to change, you know, you are stamped with basically with original sin, and you know it's being rejected across the Western world. You know, it's not just in America where you're seeing Zoomers and Gen Alpha being, you know, more and more right wing than previous generations. It's Germany as well. You know, you've got attractive young people singing Ausländer Raus to the tune of Gigi D'Agostino's Jour or whatever it is. You know, I mean, it's like it's a civilizational thing. Actually, there is very definitely this kind of youthful, irreverent energy that's really surging up, and I think the older generations don't actually know really what to do with it. But you know, you saw this even actually with the Trump tariffs thing. You know, when everything looked like it was going to shit, and you know, you have like young people saying, "Well, I got nothing from the system. I get nothing from the system. What buy-in do I get from the system?" So if Trump wants to burn it all down with these crazy, you know, tariffs, whatever, then let him. I mean, there is a kind of madcap. There's a kind of madcap energy to this, and a kind of, you know,
And the tariffs.
accelerationist desire.
Oh, continue.
No, that was it. That was it.
But when
I
all
was
you
gonna
have
say-
is debt, and when all you have is nothing on the stock market, you have no problem with this. If there's inflation, it's going to be a lot easier to pay off that debt. And it's kind of satisfying to watch all the smug people who've acted as though they worked so hard and really didn't, to get so much that you can't even get when you work twice as hard.
Sure.
Suffer a little. It's very satisfying, if anything.
Well, and I know the tariffs paid off. You know, he canceled most of them. 76 countries are now at the bargaining table. Delayed, but he's given them the opportunity to negotiate without the big economic. And then China went against us and now has a 125% tariff on them, which I think can rally the rest of the world around China, which has been treating the rest of the world very unfairly for a long time. And I think that this is the sort of vitalism that people wanted to see from the White House. They wanted to see big moves. Like, even if he goes in and he goes out, they just wanted to see the White House do something. You know, it feels like when Biden is in office, nothing was happening. Just
Well, I mean, look, I mean, Biden was a zombie. I mean, Biden really was a zombie.
He was literally puppeted by the deep state. Like, I love how we, like, at first it was Trump is like, I'm fighting against the deep state, and everyone's like, you're crazy, this is the conspiracy theory. And then we learned that, like, Biden hasn't been making decisions for like years, and that the Democrats like didn't even hold primaries. And we're like, oh yeah, I mean, well, obviously the deep state handled all that, but you know, no problem.
Crazy. And I mean, you know, during the election campaign before Biden dropped out, then, you know, you had Axios. They did an article saying, "Meet the Biden oligarchy," where it was like, yeah, these are the people who are actually making decisions for Joe Biden. It's his wife, it's his best friend, and some other people. And you're like, well, you know, who voted for this? Who voted for an oligarchy rather than an actual executive? You know, because that's what the president is. I mean, the president is the executive. It's the executive function, but actually it's been transferred to an oligarchy. So yeah, I mean, I think that the contrast between Trump, I mean, okay, Trump is an old man, sure, but he doesn't have old man energy. I mean, he's not Joe Biden. I mean, Trump is the most insanely youthful 76-year-old, however old he is, you know, and he really has captured, you know, with his meme power, because he's just, you know, he is a phenomenon. There isn't really anybody like him.
Truly.
And so yeah, I mean, now is very definitely the time for a different vision of not only of right-wing politics but also of right-wing culture more broadly. And you know, one of the things that's very important about Man's World is that, about the vision for Man's World, is that, you know, right-wingers over the course of the 20th century retreated basically into economics. They ceded the entire cultural ground to their enemies. They said, you know, you have the universities, you make all the art, you make all the television programs. We'll just have like liberal and neoliberal economics. You know, we'll make sure that the free market reigns, and that will mean that we have a right-wing society if we have free market economics. Well, actually, it doesn't. Actually, it doesn't. And you know, we've learned over the course of the 20th century that it's has been one of the biggest mistakes actually that the right has made, to cede so much cultural territory to its enemies, to let them have art. You just have art. You have Hollywood. You have music. You have everything. You know, and we'll just have economics. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important, you know, to be producing culture, to be producing innovative culture, not culture that's staid and boring and that doesn't appeal to young people, but actually culture that's exciting. And you know, because there's nothing exciting about the left anymore. I mean, the left is ruled by committee. It's ruled by, you know, committees of women and obese minorities and disabled people, and you know, like, there's nothing in that that's exciting for young people. I mean,
Yeah.
and leftist art, you know, leftist art has totally abandoned the kind of core mission of art.
Unpleasant.
Yeah.
It's actively unpleasant, and that's the thing that I find when I look at something like Man's World, is that it is actively pleasant. Like it like looking at it is visually engaging, and makes my brain, like, I think it's interesting that I'm like, oh, this makes my brain feel pleasure when I look at this. I feel vitalistic. I feel excited. I want to look at more of it. And it's so different from the other. Like, if I go to an art museum these days, it's just like depressing.
Yeah, I just come out. We don't anymore. It's too depressing. Yeah, come away.
Well, when we were in Miami, so we were all at Hereticon, weren't we, in Miami in October? So I did a panel with Lomez, Jonathan Keeperman, you know, who runs Passage Press. They publish a magazine, and with Curtis Yarvin and Peachy Keenan about
all friends, great people.
Yeah, great people, about right-wing literature and the right-wing art scene, all that kind of stuff. And in attendance, actually, I found out afterwards, was a guy from Playboy, and he came up to me, a journalist from Playboy, and he came up to me and he said, "Oh, we're all taking notice of what you're doing at Playboy." Okay. So they're actually about to release, for the first time, I think, in 5 years, a physical edition. So they've retreated to the website over the last 5 years because sales have been down so much. So, you know, you won't find Playboy on the store shelves because it's just a website at the moment. But he actually said to me, "Look, I want to interview you in Playboy about what is wrong with Playboy," which I thought was quite interesting, quite brave potentially, you know, for the magazine to do that. But
I love that.
Yeah, there isn't really any competition for this at the moment. I mean, my hope generally is that, you know, we end up actually creating a broader scene where you get loads of people making, you know, right-wing magazines, whatever, right-wing art. I mean, one caution though that I do have is that actually, I mean, in many ways, I think it's actually a dead end to produce right-wing art. I actually think that, you know, the left has totally ceded the ground of all of the kind of traditional values and virtues of art. Basically, you know, representation, it's out the window. The best thing we can do actually is produce art, just produce good art, because the left isn't doing that. So
absolutely,
you know, return to the kind of traditional tenets of art, the return to the basic framework of art, and just produce good art. Produce art that's appealing, that actually, you know, that people want to see. And likewise, you know, produce writing that people want to read, produce films that people want to watch. You don't have to lay on the ideology with a trowel. You know, you don't have to bash people over the head with, this is a right-wing product as opposed to a left-wing product. I think it needs to be it needs to be kind of subtle. I mean, I know that with Man's World, you would look at the cover, you know, it's got Donald Trump on the cover and the stuff inside, and it's unmistakably, I would say, Trumpist, right wing, whatever. But actually, there's room to be subtle as well, and I think that
Yeah.
that's really what we need to do. I mean, if we're gonna have a kind of cultural takeover, then it doesn't just have to serve as a kind of like tool of indoctrination. And in fact, actually, I think that would make it less attractive than if you just.
Well, there's nothing inherently political about vitalism, about beauty, about enthusiasm and optimism.
Hold on, there wasn't anything inherently political about beauty.
Well, I'm saying it doesn't have to be.
Political, and we
it has
can
been
capitalize
made.
on that.
It doesn't have to be.
But I'd point out, you know, if you look at the artistic movements of the past, the subversive artistic movements of the past, they often had like scenes where, you know, you'd be in New York or you'd be in Berlin and you'd go to the secret clubs and everything like that. And what's really interesting about this is that because we live in the age of the internet and in the age of 4chan, the scene is X networks. It's Hereticon. It's you know, this will be remembered as the scene where this artistic movement was blooming. And we'll also see, I think you are absolutely right to point to, you know, Bronze Age pervert as one of the progenitors of this. I think you have Zero HP Lovecraft as another one of the progenitors of this. But people who will be remembered if humanity survives. This is, hey, we're in an interesting time in human history right now. I don't know, but I'm saying, like, if humanity does survive another 100 years and we're looking back and we're studying this as an artistic movement, that's really fascinating to me, the way that this lives in online circles instead of. And another interesting thing is it's very it's got this combination of, you know, you could almost sort of say but sexualized content within the images. Or if you look at our podcast, like, we talk about sexuality pretty frequently, but instead of like the artists of the past, where that sexualized content was paired with debauchery was in the personal lives of the people who output it, engaging in debauchery. Like, if I engage in debauchery, like the guy who's into like cuckoldry and filming and whatever, like, he's been expelled from the community to an extent that you are supposed to you know, treat your wife well. You're supposed to, you know, be in these sorts of like stable relationships. So it's a contrast in the art behind what's depicted in it and what's expected from the creator, which is really, I think, subversive of what was historically expected of your cutting edge artist.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, there are certainly tensions, I think, and there have been tensions with Man's World. So in the first issue, I mean, so the first 12 issues were all digital. They were online, you know, they were just PDFs. And in the very first issue, then I reprinted some classic 1980s centerfolds, and I called from Playboy, and I called the feature Vintage Bush, because you know, it's a very the decline.
That's so great, but come on, but people are like,
I know, like, but you know, like the decline of pubic hair in soft sort of pornography and in pornography more generally is an interesting, and in society more generally, in fact, you know, it's an interesting thing. And so I was like, you know, these are like kind of quite charming, actually, you know, these, I mean, obviously attractive women, and yes, they are nude, but they have, you know, sort of like expansive pubic hair. And there was a lot of people found it really funny, and they were like, yeah, this is really cool. But then there was actually quite a pushback, like the trad cats and people like that, you know, were like, oh, this is, I love the magazine, but I can't in good conscience share this. And so that kind of went out of the window, actually, having centerfolds and stuff. I mean,
I love the idea of it being nostalgic and subversive at the same time. Like, it fits the aesthetic, but I can also understand why Tradcast would have problems. One thing I note, and I want to hear, because the magazine is very different, and I didn't realize this until I saw it printed at the event, and I was like, oh, I get this now. It does not look like, and I actually may want to subscribe, Simone. We'll talk about it. I'll ask you how much it costs to subscribe as well, sir, for people who want to go and look at it. But it's really structured more like a coffee table book, where it's supposed to be a really nice thing, bordering on like a high quality soft cover book.
Well, that's what good magazines were always supposed to be. You would always
No,
have
they-
them out.
They for a
Conspicuously.
period, like I remember when I would buy like Maxim or something, it was like floppy, it was flimsy paper. The images were like okay and engaging, but it wasn't meant to be enthralling. This reminds me a lot more of like, I don't know, almost like the Klutz series when I was a kid that had like all
What?
sorts of like weird things that I just remember being delightful to me as a kid. So how much does it cost? How often does it come out?
So at the moment it's biannual, so we're doing 2 issues a year. I believe at the moment it is $39.99 an issue. But like you say, it's not a regular magazine and it's not supposed to be. So I mean, we're doing, in magazine terms, we're doing small runs, however many thousand rather than 100,000 or 200,000 or 1 million or whatever, like Playboy in its heyday. And so, we're doing small batches, and what we want it to be is we want it really to be like each one should be like a collector's item. I mean, it's an item that's designed to last. It's on beautiful acid-free paper. The cover will have something like the logo will be covered in gold foil, for example. I mean, it's really high. It's really, really high class. It's like if that was on a newsstand, that would be the best magazine by far.
100%. Yeah, top shelf.
Yeah.
So-
Well, it didn't look like a magazine. And when I saw it, and when I hear about your contextualization of it now, I was like, oh, I get this in a way I didn't get it before seeing it. I was like,
It comes across different in print. It's great online.
This is the type
Print
of
hits
thing
different.
I want my son to stumble across and dig through because he finds it stimulating. Like he's like, oh, this is weird and subversive and like and I didn't see like with all the film crews in our house, we definitely need to get a subscription, Simone. It's only twice a year, like definitely. Because I wouldn't want it to be more than twice a year because it's so like solid and engaging that it's like I wouldn't want more than
You don't
that.
want to get to a point where you don't have time to read through all of it. That's one of those things.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, it is still just me making it. So
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I have a designer who I get to do some of the images and stuff, but I do the layout, I do all the editing, I write, I make the memes, I write probably 1 or 2 articles per issue as well. So I mean, it's all me at the moment. So two is enough for now. But I mean, I think we have plans to expand, and so at most, I think we'll probably do a quarterly. At most.
That's fair.
But,
and that helps to explain why it's so cohesive. I mean, the quality control, therefore, just really...
it's just me. It just all goes through me. But yeah, I wouldn't want to release an issue every month. I mean, you would have to have a really big, really slick operation to be able to do that, and that would be my job. That would be my full-time job then. And so
yeah. Well, I'm really glad we had you on. I'm glad we had this conversation because I think that future art historians will be studying this conversation and saying, "Oh, what was this artistic movement that because the academics can't engage with it, because they're afraid to, right? Like it is subversive."
Well, there are actually some academic articles about me and about Manswell, which is interesting. But they're
no way.
Yeah, they're totally. It's all like, oh, this is the aesthetics of fascism. This is about like the glorification of the body, masculinity, and
how dare we?
So it's typical. It's the kind of stuff you'd expect, and it's largely. I mean, it's very funny, they try to analyze the memes, and it's also ham-fisted, and they just don't get it. They're not conversant with the culture. They don't understand the degree of irony, etc. So it's kind of embarrassing really for them. But yeah, I mean, I think
it's amazing.
Oh my God.
I think it takes someone with a softer touch, I think, to understand it. It takes someone who's actually conversant with the culture.
Well, so this reminds me of a John Oliver segment where he was looking at Trump, and Trump took up, Riley Gaines, a woman who's been campaigning against the trans stuff. And he goes to her, he goes, well, anyone who can look at me and her can see that I'm a much larger and stronger person than her, and I could beat her in any swimming race. And of course, this is actually a very funny joke from Trump. But John Oliver thought he was being dead serious and was like making fun of him for it. And I was like, is comedy dead? Like, how do you not see that he's having a laugh here? But I also think that what you're pointing out here with academia not being able to engage in it, nothing if academia is close to the center of power within our culture, you can't be the new subversive artistic
No.
movement and be something academia can understand. If academia can understand you, then you're not the new subversive artistic movement. And I don't think that any other movement on earth right now can claim that. Like, it's so weird that like the beatniks of our generation or the whatever is like this right-leaning. And you know, it's funny that you mentioned like the centerfold, because that's also a tension we had on our show, which is on our show we used to we do lots of clips on our show of like memes from the 90s and South Park and stuff like that, and we used to have a lot of gamer words or curse words. And then somebody reached out and they're like, I watched this with my kid, can you please, you know, remove all curse words? And I was like, you know what, yeah, I'm gonna do that. It doesn't hurt us to just remove all curse words. Like, the adults know what's being said if I delete just those words. And I was like, I think that that's part of it. It's to be provocative, you know, sexually, to be provocative in terms of how we engage with stuff, but to remove all of the actual vulgarities I wouldn't want my son engaging with.
We actually see this in old media. I don't know if this ever really aired in the UK, but there's a kids show called Magic School Bus that we watched a lot as kids.
Yes, yeah, I remember that.
And we're watching it again with our kids now, and there's a lot of episodes that imply that Mrs. Frizzle has had sexual relationships with a lot of other people.
Basically, every other competent man has very clearly had a sexual relationship with her.
Yeah, and we're like, whoa, like, this is really interesting. And there's a whole bunch of other things that happen in it where we're like, this is extremely sexually
suggestive. One time when the kids turn into eggs and then have fish fertilize them and they become fish.
What's like, that whole thing with Phoebe and her teacher too? But yeah, anyway, so like, I think that there's a lot of that subversiveness in the past, quite recently, where it's communicable to adults but available to children as well, which is interesting. And I think, you know, pretty pronatal when something is capable of being multi-layered like that. Whereas, you know, we've devolved into an era now where I think it was Tina Fey describing how they wrote the script for the sitcom 30 Rock, describing how whenever they do a joke, first they do the joke and then they like explicitly explain the joke for the people who can't process what a joke is, I guess. And we sort of come to that point where we like literally have to explain every joke we've just told.
Very much.
I think that there's also sort of unsaid between the pages of what you've written that not every academic is able to pick up, this level of nuance and cleverness that we've forgotten how to communicate, that I'd love to see more pervasive again.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's, like I said earlier, I think that the humor and the kind of irreverence, that's important. That's not secondary. That's central. That's
clearly,
it's absolutely integral to the package. It's integral to the message and to the whole vibe and to the whole movement, actually. And so, you know, I mean, there are other magazines on the market, you know, in the same space, but none of them really captures, I think, that kind of energy, that kind of irreverence, which I think distinguishes the online world, distinguishes the right-wing sort of Twitter world, 4chan, etc., and is obviously now actually is kind of dominant in American culture because Trump is in the White House.
Yes.
So, you know, I mean, I think that it will be good actually once that spirit really does start to spread to other publications and to other media.
It'll happen. You're pushing it forward. You are the spark.
I hope you are remembered alongside, like, who is that writer who you mentioned, like Michael Thompson or
Hunter S. Thompson.
Hunter Thompson. I hope you're remembered as our generation's version of that, you know, defining a style of write, because you're both defining a style of writing and art and collating it. And I think that if humanity survives, that will be seen as a central part of this generation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
May your cremated remains be shot from the equivalent of a cannon.
I think they're going to be making a lot of movies with this style.
Yeah.
All of the popular movies of the next generation are going to be made in this style in the same way that we take up the popular styles of the past. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, cool.
have a
Check out everyone, Man's World. You can still access everything digitally, right? And then there's the twice-a-year publications, correct?
Yeah, so there's mansworldmag.online. You can read a selection of articles from the magazine. We also publish 2 exclusive online-only articles every week. There's a store as well. We've got absolutely great t-shirts on the store, like hilarious Trump t-shirts.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Hello.
Yeah, there's some great ones. There's an anime Trump tees, and in fact, I would say that it's got the best Trump tees around on the website, mansworldmag.online/store. Really,
and then you're also at Baby Gravy on X.
Yeah,
and
Baby Gravy 9. Yep.
You should also, Baby Gravy 9, and check out Raw Egg Nationalist on Amazon, because you've also written some very influential books.
And I've got a new book coming out this month.
What?
With Passage, called "The Last Men: Liberalism and the Death of Masculinity." That's about testosterone decline, fertility decline as a civilizational problem.
Yes, which was really the big topic of the first time you came on our podcast. That was our.
Hold on. I gotta say what some of these shirts say. One has an anime girl like looking like, oh, you better be paying attention. It says a right-wing bodybuilder is talking. Listen, learn.
So there was a very funny T-shirt that said that this is based on. It said something like, "A black woman is speaking. Listen and learn."
Oh.
And so that's where
Amazing.
Oh, hold on. They've got a Baron Trump one here. Look at this.
No.
He's got lightning eyes and like a Caesar thing. Ave Baron.
Yes, you're putting these on screen, right, Malcolm? You're gonna put them in post.
I'll try to.
Better, Malcolm.
I can.
Yes.
We got one here. Trump 2024. Riggers could be here. I don't get that one.
Oh, that's okay. That's a 4chan. That's a 4chan meme.
Okay. I'm not gonna say more on that then. We don't want to
This is good. Yeah, well, congratulations on your book coming out too. I'm very excited to read this because you've found some of the best research that we have read on the subject.
Get in the crystal libtard. It's Donald. So can you explain the crystal meme? That was like fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but people started saying that they were going to imprison libtards in crystals when Donald Trump got elected. And so, every time a libtard would post something on Twitter and somebody would post a picture of a crystal, and it would be a countdown to Trump's election. Or inauguration.
So this seems to have come from liberals. Our video when Trump was elected said, "Report to the Mar-a-Lago breeding pens," and it's very much along that where liberals were acting like everyone was going to be like arrested or whatever. And so I think they went with the idea of like a from like 80s Superman and stuff like that, like capturing people in crystals.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, everyone definitely check out the book when it comes out. Do you have a date?
I think it will be ready for order this month from Passage.press. But just keep your eyes peeled, watch my Twitter, and there'll be a big announcement.
Awesome. Cool. Oh, Raw Egg Nationalist.